Welcome. I'm Crystal Cotto Sullivan, wisdomologist and your host of Journey to Inner Wisdom. As a wisdomologist, I guide and coach women on their journey to finding their magic, discovering limiting beliefs, uncovering blind spots, and creating breakthroughs in their lives. We work on awareness, beliefs, and curiosity cycle to uncover their hidden treasure. I've been talking about the many facets of the journey to inner wisdom. This journey takes many turns, and there are sometimes detours, invitations, forks in the road. Sometimes we're prepared, and sometimes we have to make some tough choices in order to move on. And sometimes we just fall asleep and miss out. So awareness and being aware and awake is critical. My guests each have a different journey. They use different tools that they've found to assist that journey. They have different gifts and different magic. I hope by their sharing their journey and their magic, you will be inspired to continue to pursue your journey, to increase your awareness, and boldly embrace the opportunities that present themselves to you. I hope you will join me on this adventure. Today, I'm excited to be having a conversation with Gillian Andrews, writer and woman on a journey. Welcome, Gillian.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here this morning.
Great. It's great to have you. Let me tell you a little bit about Gillian. Gillian is, like the heroine of her book, Gift of the Loon, she's primarily a woman attempting to find her way in her chosen field. She has long questioned what it means to be a successful writer. An experienced canoeist and hiker, Gillian visited the locations where Gift of the Loon takes place to experience their natural beauty firsthand. Stopping at nothing to research her writing, Gillian has even taken art classes to gain an understanding of what it feels like to hold a paintbrush, how to use a palette knife, and how to experiment with color. Gillian lives in Chatham, Ontario, Canada, with her husband and 2 children who are both writers. So welcome again, Gillian.
Thank you very much.
So I'm excited to talk to you today about your writing and your books, and tell us a little bit about how you got started as a writer.
Well, writing has always been a part of my life for a very long time. I think my very first memory is probably high school. I remember being in English class and really enjoying writing. And I also used to write little stories for my friends, little romances that I'd share at sleepovers. And I've always been a journaler. I always like to write down my thoughts. And then years went by, and I was working at the library, and I decided to stay home with my children. But I also knew that I wanted to do something more. And I got this idea for a story. It was a romance. And I started writing it. And at that time, there were no computers. So that's a long time ago. And so I had to do it by hand. And so every Thursday night, I would take the time for my family and I would just start writing. And as I was writing, I used to start getting a Writer's Digest magazine. And in the magazine, there were always some advertisements to take writing courses. But there was this one with a company called NRI in Washington, D.C. that really got me excited. I knew that I had to take this course. And we didn't have a lot of money at the time, but I talked to my husband, and we figured it out so we could just pay a little bit of time to take this writing course. It's the best thing I did for myself. It took me 2 years, but it gave me confidence, and it broke down the writing process for me. And I've been writing on and off ever since. And writing sometimes kind of gets away from me, but it always calls me back. And I feel like writing is a calling. It's not a job. It's just something you have to do, otherwise you're not happy. At least that's been my experience.
So it sounds like the writing course was really something that pushed you forward in your writing.
It absolutely did. Yeah, it gave me a lot of confidence. And it was kind of scary at first because you're looking at different aspects of the writing process and you're trying to pull them all together and you're like, oh my God, like this is just too much. But over time, it just becomes a natural part of your process. You just know what is needed to write the story. It's all there. And after I wrote my first book, once again, it boosted me to a new level of confidence. So when I've been told that my second book, Gift of the Loon, they say people see a huge improvement. And I think that might be because in that book, um, because I was writing historical fiction, it was new for me. It was kind of scary. So after about 60 pages in, I um, I was stuck. I was like, because I was so scared to move forward, I didn't want to do the wrong thing. I thought, what can I put in historical fiction that's acceptable? What can I make up? And so I ended up getting in contact with a writer, Don Gilmore, who's a very well-known writer. He wrote Canada, A People's History. He's one of those writers, and To the River, won awards, in fact. I got in touch with him, and I figured, what have I got to lose? If he says no, I've lost nothing. But he said yes, which scared me to death. So now I had to travel to Toronto. And he said, oh, come next week. Come this morning. So I traveled to Toronto on the train, stayed overnight, and I had to get through the subway system, which scares me to death, but I really needed his help, right? So I spent the morning with him, and I showed his writing process, some books that he suggested. And, I never had any trouble at all after that. I just plowed through, and it went really well after that. And one of the most important things I think he taught me, because I was in Gift of the Loon, there's a famous person in it, Tom Thompson, who's a famous Canadian artist from early 1900s. He was part of well, it wasn't exactly part of the group of seven, but he knew that those artists. But one thing he said, if you want to write about a character like that, the best thing to do is to read their letters. Now, that's something we don't have available to us nowadays, but in those days, people wrote a lot of letters. So he wrote his letters, and you get a feel for what kind of person he was. And so I got to a point where I just had to take a plunge and just write him. And it was so much fun to do that. And so he needed another character to play off him. And so where our main character in the story of Gift of the Loon, Margaret Harrison, she's a young woman in the early 1900s who wants to find a place in the art world at the time. And so she has to be unusual. She has to be willing to push the boundaries at that time period where women were supposed to stay in at home and take care of the kids and the husband, but she wanted more than that. So this was the perfect person to play out Tom. And I'll be illustrating that later in a scene that I'm going to read to you from Gift of the Loon, so you get an idea of who she is.
Cool. Well, it's interesting the way that you're presenting this, because sometimes, and I think I've fallen into this trap, we think about writers and we think that it kind of just all flows and it all comes together. But as with any craft or any skill, there's a learning process to it, isn't there? Yeah. And so, if someone is wanting to write or just feels compelled that there's something they want to write, what advice would you give them?
Well, definitely to take a course. I mean, it really helped me to know what I was doing. I mean, of course, that's not for everybody. Some people, I know writers who just dive in have done very well for themselves. But for me, taking a course helped a great deal, and also being a reader, an avid reader of all kinds of books. And I think reading biographies, so when you're creating your characters, you get an idea of the different types of people and what happened in their lives to make them who they are and what motivated them. And I think being a people watcher, observe. Next time you go to Tim Hortons, take a pen and paper. And this is something I used to do. Sit there and take a pen and paper, and I would just watch people, and I'd wonder, what's that person's life like? And I would write about that. Or something else they suggest too is listening in on conversations, which I can't do because of the hearing loss. But 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 it's interesting, yeah, to be aware. And also, people in your life who have different jobs or different careers, talk to them. What's it all about? That might be something there that you can use in your book. Or at least okay, if I know a policeman,
Mhm.
I could get in touch with them and say, hey, what's that like? I'm writing, a mystery book. What's that like? Or a woman. Or like, well, in my case, a man. But I remember on one of my writing sites, this man wanted to write from a woman's perspective. He said, how do I do that? I said, well, you talk to a woman. What's that
Right.
like? You get inside their head. And, with me writing about Tom Thompson, I had to know him a lot. I had to know about him because, of course, his thinking is different than yours. And I
Sure.
think you have to have empathy too for other people, for their feelings, and
Mm.
try to imagine, what would this person do? Like, it wouldn't be
Mhm.
what I would do, but this
Mhm.
person
Mhm.
will do something that I would not. And this is an interesting process when you're writing your characters. You might want them to do something, but they won't do it, which is kind of interesting because it doesn't feel right. You know it's not right. You create an entire character outline of the person and you have it in your head, and this person's not going to do it. And if that's the case, you have to let it go because it's not going to ring true for your reader. So you have to let it go no matter how good it is. It's what they call kill your darling. That good bit of writing is not going to fit into the story. So let it go. And once you let it go, things open up again, to the right path. So
So
it's an
you really,
interesting process.
so you really have to kind of let go of your ego in all of this, don't you? And let the story flow, because it sounds like it kind of has, you do the work and you
Hmm.
do your research, and then it starts to flow,
Yes,
and
yes,
it hangs together.
yes. It
And
really does, yeah, very organically. And that's how I write too, I think organically. Some people like to, you know, plan everything out. And if
yeah,
that works for you, then that's fine. But for me, I know, who my characters are. I know what my situation is going to be, but I don't always know how the story is going to end.
yeah, yeah,
I certainly didn't in Gift of the Loon. I wouldn't get to the end until I figured out how it was going to end up. So yes, that is really interesting. And yes, in one aspect, the story does flow and you have to let it. But at the same time, it's hard work to let it flow. People go into writing, think, oh, I write a book. Well, what really bothers me a lot is that, you see these advertisements all the time. Write a book in, I don't know, 3 months. And I said, what? How could you possibly do that? It takes me 4 years to write a book. But then,
mm,
there's a lot of research. And, I'm certainly not at it 8 hours a day. But,
right,
2, 3, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And sometimes it does not flow.
yeah,
Sometimes, what do I do next? Yeah, sometimes I get stuck. Um, and then that's when you get stuck, it's when it's a really good idea to get somebody to read what you've written, to give them your feedback, and hopefully somebody who knows what you can do, like somebody who's a reader, for example, or in
right.
my case, it was Don Gilmore. I would certainly trust my son or my daughter with it,
Mhm.
because, and my husband too, for that matter. He's an avid reader as well. But yeah, I get someone I trust who's a reader who understands how stories are put together to have a look at it and say, oh, we thought about this. Oh, this isn't working over there. And maybe that's all you need, just to push it
Mm,
open, and you get you
mm.
going again.
So there are a couple of different things it sounds like that could kind of stop you. One, writers will often talk about writer's block, but then there's also, you get to a point in the story and it's like, okay, what do we do next? So those are two different things, I think, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So how do you, so it sounds like getting other people's perspective helps you kind of get past, okay, what's going to happen next? But what
Hmm.
about, do you ever get writer's block?
Well, I consider that writer's block, the fact that,
Oh, okay.
say, when I was writing Gift Alone, I got 60 pages in and I was stuck. I consider that writer's block.
Okay.
There's also this other aspect that you're talking about is, okay, what's the next part of the story? And for me, because I write historical fiction, I've done a lot of research. As I'm researching, I'm taking notes.
Mhm.
And then from those notes, I'll go through the notes that I have.
Okay.
And then I read them over again. So I'm familiarizing myself with the time period or the
Mhm.
people or situations or places.
Mhm.
And, and I'll get an image in my head. Oh, that'll make a good part of the story. So I'll get my index cards out. So we're kind of narrowing it down a little bit. I get my index cards out, and okay, this part will work for Maggie. This part will work for Tom. This part will work for Claire, and I'll put them in boxes and they'll be organized. So if I'm stuck, I go through and say, okay, maybe I can use that. Other times, and this is amazing to me because this is another battle writers have, sitting down and actually doing the writing.
Mhm.
You can sit down yesterday and
Mhm.
have, done some really good writing.
Mhm.
But then now this is today. Is it going to be the same? It's
Hmm.
it's scary. And this is why writers procrastinate, because they're scared to sit down. But every time I actually make myself sit down and do the work, I get something. Even if it's a
Hmm.
little something,
Yeah.
it's something.
Yeah.
Ideally you want like 2 or 3 pages when you sit down to write, and that's good. Sometimes you might not get that, and you have to tell yourself, that's good. I took a step forward here.
Mhm.
So, but sometimes something else takes over. Um, Sometimes the images just come to you. Like
Mm.
often what I do when I sit down, I will go back and read the last few pages or the last chapter just to get myself back in the story.
Mhm.
Then something might come up.
Mhm.
And then and something else that's really important, when I'm done for the day, I'll think, okay, what's going to happen now? And if something comes to my head, I'll just type it in so it's there tomorrow when I sit down. Just very brief, rough notes, or
Mhm.
even in point form, just so it refreshes my memory. I might not get to it the next day, but it's there.
Right.
And I have it again, something to prompt me to move forward.
Right. And
Yeah,
I would think that when your mind is opened, that stuff can just pop in at any time.
absolutely. Yes. It's very rare. I've had times when I feel like someone is speaking through me and typing, and
Mm.
I'm at a very heightened sense of awareness, and it's a little scary. And
Mm.
I think creative people are not used to that. I mean, maybe some are. I can't speak for everyone, but I certainly am not ready for that. Like, I can't believe it is happening. How long is this going to last? I want to hold on to this, or maybe I don't want to hold on to this because it's a little scary. It's just a sense of some divine intervention that's
Yeah.
happening there. That's not something that happens every day, but it's pretty amazing.
That's
So,
that's that's great. There's a story, and I can't remember who the writer was, but she told a story about how she knew when an idea was coming. She could just sense it. And
mhm,
if she was out in her garden, she'd have to leave what she was doing, run into the house, grab
mm,
a pen, and start writing. And she'd get
mhm.
the idea down. And she said, if she didn't do that, she would know that the idea would go past her and
Yes,
somebody
yes,
else would get it.
yes,
Somebody else would catch it. So it's
absolutely,
almost
yes.
as if there are these, all of these ideas in the universe, and some of them we catch and some of them someone else catches, but they're there and it's being open and aware and ready
Hmm,
for
hmm.
these. I mean, whether you're a
Yeah,
writer or you're creating something, that
hmm,
there's the idea. And your sense of it's coming from divine intervention or the universal energy or whatever it is,
hmm,
I
hmm.
think it's there, and it's a
Yeah,
gift. It's like, oh wow, that's pretty awesome. And you hear about writers that they write whole tomes that way, like the Course
yeah,
in Miracles or books
hmm,
like that.
hmm.
Even I think J.K. Rowling was just kind of like, whoo, this story just came out of her. I think 8 books. Holy smokes. So
Yeah.
Gillian, where do you get your ideas for your books? Where do they come from?
Okay, as you were talking about writing ideas that come to you, one of the first things I learned when I was taking a writing course is have an idea folder. So if you see something in a newspaper or magazine, you put it there. And actually, that's how I got the idea for my first book, River of the Stick Wavers. I was reading an obituary of all things in the Globe and Mail
yeah.
about this woman who was she was in her 80s and she was never married. She was a teacher, and every summer she would go out all by herself to this cottage on an island and spend the summer. I thought, oh my God, I want to be that woman. Who is she? I wanted to know about her.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's who I wrote about in my first book.
Cool.
And then when I was coming to the end of that book, in this book, and in that first book, River the Stick Wavers, the character named Margaret, Maggie Harrison, and she was married and she was an artist and she would be in her 70s. And then one day, my son was very familiar with my book because he does, all my editing and stuff like that. And so he came to me with an image of this young woman, 18 years old. She's standing on the dock and she's painting on an easel. And he said, "This is Maggie."
Huh.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to write this her story now. I was very lucky that they came to me before I was even finished my first book.
Huh.
And so, like I put these things away and they're there when I'm ready for them. But what I had to do with her, I had to take her, like my first book was set in 1963 when we first meet Maggie at 70. I had to take her back to when she was 18, which would bring us to 1911. Wow, my goodness. Like, what do I know about 1911?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what was I getting myself into? And my son said, well, you're not going to do it because it's hard. Uh-oh. No, I have to do it, right? And so I did, and I'm glad I did it. And it wasn't easy because there's an element of trust, I think. You have to trust that all these pieces are going to somehow all come together. All this research that you do, these character outlines that you do, and the idea that somehow it's all going to put together. And you know what? It does. It really does. So you have to trust, okay, yes, it's hard now. Just keep going. Go to the next level. And it does come together. And I'm very proud of Gift of the Loon. Yes, it's really quite an exciting process. Yeah, did I answer your entire question there?
Yeah. And there are a couple of things that are so interesting. One is that you have an idea folder, which I think that's a brilliant because for my podcast, I have the same thing. I have an idea folder and I throw names in and I throw topics in and whatever. And even though some of them I may not use, they stimulate something else, like something else can come up out of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's kind of like a vision board almost, where you're putting everything out there and more develops from it. So I love that idea. But I think the other thing that you've said too earlier on is that how important it is just to read, because there's so much out there that's so interesting, and just to get your mind around how to use words, even because words are so interesting.
Yes. It just brings to mind something I was told very early in the writing process is to decide what kind of writing you're going to do. It could be romance, mystery, historical fiction, and stick with that and get to know it well. That makes sense, right?
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that way. You can change all the time. Look at Margaret Atwood, all the kinds of books that she's written, all the different kinds of genres. I mean, she started out as a poet, and then she started writing books, and then she's written like comic books, and apparently one of her books was turned into a ballet. Matt Adam, I think, was turned into a ballet just recently. So don't limit yourself. If your passion is to to write something that's not in your genre, then do it. Like I would love to write a travel story. I'd like to, travel Canada and write about it. I think that would be really exciting. I've always wanted to see Canada. I know whenever I take a holiday, when I'm going to England in September and Scotland, I'll be taking my journal with me and writing everything down. You never know. I might use it sometime,
That's right.
And actually, yeah, and I think you know this too. Part of the reason I'm going to Scotland in the Lake District. The Lake District is where my next book is going to be set. So I want to go to the place called Keswick in the Lake District, and I want to see Castle Stone Circle. That's going to be part of my book. I want to walk around Derwentwater, which is not far from Keswick, and know what that feels like. Yeah, exactly what it feels like. Like I can read books about other people's journeys, but
Right.
it won't be me experiencing it, because I like to get inside what I'm writing, whether it's a person or the place.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking about the place, I think both of my books that I've written are both my first two books were set in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And Canada is such a beautiful, beautiful, rugged country. And I think the country, the landscape, plays almost a character in my books, because
Interesting.
it shapes the people who are in that landscape. And and I know in my first book I talked about some of the history of the French River where that
Mm-hmm.
book took place. So it educates, well, informs. I hate to say educate, informs the story. It informs the reader and informs the character as well, I think. So yeah, I think setting. I just love writing about setting. So for me, yeah, I have to go and know what it feels like, what it smells like, what will I see, how hard will it be to get there? I don't know. Just
Well,
it just really helps.
you're gonna have lots of fun roaming around the Lake District in
Yes,
September. That'll be
yes.
great.
You've been there yourself.
Yes, yes. Very,
Uh,
very lovely. Very lovely.
uh,
And we're heading to Ireland in May. Now you have to
mm,
go to Ireland because I mean there are lots of stories there, I'm sure, that could emerge.
yes,
Lovely.
yes. So it's funny because I'm very attracted to books that are set in Ireland. There's sort of a mystical, magical thing about Ireland, and it
Yes,
does sound really interesting.
yes.
Yeah, I thought about seeing if I could get over there, because it's from where I'm going to be. I'm going to end up in Morecambe where my cousin lives,
Uh-huh.
and you can drive to a dock where it takes you a ferry over to Ireland. I'm just
That's
not
right.
sure about the timing or not, but I
Well,
thought, oh, gee,
it's not very far away.
yeah.
Take the ferry, so it's a fairly easy a journey across.
Hmm.
And the other option is you can easily fly by Ryanair for like under $50 from Manchester or
Mm.
Liverpool to
Ah,
Dublin or to Belfast. Yeah, very,
mm.
very easy to fly over.
That's good to know, because Manchester is only an hour away from where I'm going to end up in Morecambe.
Okay, there you go.
Mm.
There you go. There's another
Mm.
gathering of information.
Ooh. But it's
You
fun,
know,
and
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say, being a writer for me isn't just about, I mean, I love the writing process, but I've met so many amazing people,
Mm,
you, for example, and I've got to go to all these wonderful different places, and I've learned so much through the
yes.
research,
Yeah.
things that interest me. I've expanded my knowledge.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it's a wonderful ride. I'm just really enjoying it, and I don't want it to ever end. I'll die with a pen in my hand.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Something you said that I think really I want to emphasize is that there's not one size that fits all for writers, that
Right.
everyone has certainly a different style, but also a different way of going about writing. And I
Hmm.
think sometimes, people might take a writing course and they think, oh, this isn't for me, but it might not be the right writing course. And I think
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
if you have that desire to really explore different ways of writing and different approaches to writing. I know my sister wrote a book, and her book is basically when she was raising her kids, every day she kept a journal because she thought, I'll never remember all of this stuff. So she would write every day, every day, every day. And so her book is really kind of a history of raising her kids and the lessons learned and the interactions and the formation of character of her children. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? You know, keeping journals, that's one way. And you talk about when you travel, you keep a journal. So it's really observing life. You know, I always come back to awareness because it's all about paying attention to what's going on, isn't it? You know,
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's always about paying attention to what's going on, that you want to be aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it sounds like you're just very attuned to wherever you are, you're noticing what's going on. So
yeah, that's interesting too. The noticing part. Years ago, when I've taken art courses on and off over the years, and I remember the first time I started taking them, one of the things I became aware of, that I was more aware of my surroundings. You know, I take the kids out for a walk. I say, "Oh, look at that beautiful clouds up there and the way the sun's shining through." Or I'd go out in the wintertime where you think everything was bare and you would find beauty there because you're looking. So I think the art actually trained me to be more observant about my surroundings. So that was
interesting.
helpful. And getting back to you talking about different approaches to being a writer, sure, like you write, not every writing course you take will be the right one. And maybe you can't take a writing course. Maybe you don't have the time, maybe you don't have the money, but don't stop writing. Yes, a lot of people are writing their memoirs because they want to leave something behind for their children. And I think that's really wonderful. So yeah, just keep writing it. And then there's so many opportunities nowadays to publish what you've written.
Right.
And to self-publish. So yeah, go to it. I think, you know, a really big thing about writing, at least for me, is being able to express yourself in some way. Like I generally write about things that are important to me. In a way, I've expressed myself. Like my first book was about a woman who just lost her husband, and she didn't know who she was without him. And that's the book is, how is she figuring that out? Well, that's interesting to me. Like something changes in your life, and now she's a woman alone. She wants to do more. Like set in the 60s, and you know, again, women were held back. They were limited to what they could do. You know. And so she'd been fighting that all her married life. So now she wants to push those boundaries. Same with Gift of the Loon. A woman in 1911 who wants to be an artist. Yes, there were some out there, but not a lot. And it certainly wasn't encouraged. So she's on her own. You know, she got to be, you know, a different kind of person. But the question I was asking there in Gift of the Loon is, how do you define success? And which is in my biography, that's what I've been trying to figure out. Is it about making money? Is it about being well known? These things are ideal, but if that's all it's about, then you're going to be possibly disappointed.
Yeah.
And so I had to redefine what it meant to me. And for me, I'm excited about writing. I'm not going to give it up because I'm not making a lot of money.
Right.
I do this because I have to. So, you know, yes, redefine your own success.
Right.
And something very important to trust your own instincts.
Yeah.
Like if I have anything about writing that I do not like, is marketing.
Right.
So, particularly online, and we have talked about this before, but what I'm finding is there are other ways that I do enjoy that I like to market.
Yeah.
You know, joining Link Ladies.
Yes.
That they're a networking group, and you know, I met you through the Link network, and Oh, and I met two other ladies, as you know, where we're starting a women's retreat together.
Hmm.
So doing the women's retreat, it's about women. It's about women pushing boundaries again. Ties in really well with my book.
Yes.
So those are the things I like to do. I like to speak.
Hmm.
So so find the things that you like to do. Don't, like the experts will tell you, you have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. No, you don't. And it took me years to let that go. Trust your own instincts. If it's not working, you're not going to do well at it if you're not
That's right.
happy doing it.
That's
Do
right.
the things that you're good at and focus on that. I mean, everybody's online trying to be found.
Yes.
Well, if they don't know who you are, they're not going to find you.
Yeah. Yeah.
To find a ways to be known in your community, for example.
Yep.
So that's a wonderful opportunity you've given me here today. Just find
Hmm.
my community, and I'm excited about that. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. It's
That's right.
another step in the right direction, I
That's
think.
right.
So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, and
Mhm.
I think the people who put themselves out as experts that a certain thing will work, it worked for them. And I
Mhm.
think you're right. It's when we engage in something with another expert to realize that what worked for them may not work completely for us, and
Absolutely.
to be able to take what will work and leave behind what won't work. And that's where you say, okay, trust your instincts and your intuition that "Mm, this fits, but this doesn't," and be
Mhm.
a little bit more discerning about the kinds of things that we take on, and really knowing yourself in terms of what works for you.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking that too. Yes. You have to know yourself.
Hmm.
Um, that's when I published my first book. I went with a company in British Columbia called Friesen Press,
Hmm.
and they were wonderful. And
Hmm.
I felt, yes, I was paying a lot of money for them to help me publish my book, but I was getting an education at the same time, so
Right.
I felt I was paying for that as well. And at the end of the actual publishing of the book, they sent a whole bunch of information about how to market. And there were
Mhm.
pages and pages and pages of stuff. And I said, I can't do all this.
Right.
And I think that's a common refrain for writers. Like, if you have the money, you can pay somebody to do all the marketing for you because it's another job all on its
That's
own.
right. That's right.
So, yeah, so I decided, yeah, to pick and choose what I wanted to do. And at that time, I started a website
Hmm.
and wrote posts,
Hmm.
and but people weren't finding them because they don't know who I am.
Hmm.
And I spent a lot of money on that and had it for a number of years. So when my website started to break down, I thought I had to let that go, and I started a blog instead.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yes, it has posts on it, but now I think it was I looked at it as an opportunity to start over. I'm a different person I was when I started that.
Sure.
So now I was able to narrow down my focus. Instead of opening up to 5 topics I was going to write about, I've narrowed it down to 2, writing and the woman's journey. So those are the things I wrote about because that is that is who I am, and it's taken time to discover that. And those are things I like to write about. And when I write about them, it's like when you're a teacher. When you teach something, it becomes more embedded in your mind,
That's
in
right.
your brain. And so you're better able to share it with people. So that's what the writing process does. And writing posts is really helpful. If a quote comes up or something, what does that mean to me? And then I'll
Hmm.
start
Hmm.
to think about it.
Hmm.
And, because if it resonated with me, it's going to resonate with other people. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. And those are the kind of things I write about.
So where would people find your blog?
I'm at Gillian Andrews author dot blogspot.com.
Okay, great. So we'll include that when we post this,
Okay,
and people will be able to read your blog.
wonderful.
Um, yeah. So at this point, you said you were going to read a passage. Would you read from
Great.
your book?
Okay. All right. I'm reading from Gift of the Loon. This is my
Beautiful.
second novel. That painting there is a painting done by Tom Thompson, the artist that I was telling you about, and he's a
Wow.
character in this book. And it was really ideal you get a picture of his. He really did portraits. He's mostly a landscape artist. But the
Yes.
fact that he did this, he must have done it for me, right?
That's right. Because I've not seen any of his work with a person in it. That's great.
Yes, yeah, and it's perfect. I like that's Maggie. And then this is the image I had of her actually. I tried to paint my own image of Maggie in art
Uh-huh.
class, and she
Uh-huh.
had a braid like that. Isn't that
Huh.
amazing? And she got this
Interesting.
long braid, and she has the right clothes on for the time period. And this
I
was
love it.
taken at Canoe Lake, where Tom Thompson used to spend his summers every year, where he used to paint Canoe Lake and Algonquin Park.
Cool.
So the passage I'm going to read to you takes place in 1915
Hmm.
in Algonquin Park. And Tom Thompson and Maggie are canoeing together for 3 weeks
Hmm.
and painting. So I'm going to read this little passage to you, and then I'm going to tell you what this passage tells you about these people. Today we're off to McGarvey Lake, but first we'll have to tackle a half-mile portage from Little Coon Lake to Whatnot Lake, followed by a shorter portage to Whatnot into McGarvey. Seems straightforward enough until I actually see it for myself. That looks really steep, I say, of the Coon Lake portage. I guess I don't call it double devil staircase for nothing. Tom walks up the trail to get a sense of what lies ahead. From where I stand, it seems to wind this way and that, with trees on both sides and rocks that jut out of the ground into the most inconvenient places. If we take our time, we should be all right, Tom says when he gets back. He then hoists the canoe onto his shoulders and begins the difficult trek. Are you sure I can help with that canoe? I ask. It'll be easier if I handle it alone. I rush to gather what other supplies I can and follow behind at a safe distance. There are places on the trail where the turns are sharp, and I worry that Tom won't be able to manage. And just like that, Tom scrapes the stern of the canoe against a tree, which throws him off balance for a split second. Are you okay? That was quite a bang. I'm fine, he manages, as he quickly retrieves his balance and adjusts the canoe back into place and keeps going. Each step Tom makes from here on in is measured and balanced. But he gets the job done one step at a time. Just when I think he's going to make it, I hear a thud. Then everything happens at once. He stumbles and falls to his knees. Somehow he manages to shove the canoe sideways. It slides between two trees through fallen debris, bounces off another tree, and careens the rest of the way down the hill before it comes to a stop. Oh my God, I rush over and sink to my knees. His pant leg is ripped and blood is seeping through at an alarming rate. I yank off my pack and rummage through my things for the first aid kit. Where is that damn thing? I say, my hands visibly shaky. I start tossing things about in my haste. Thank God, here it is. I fumble with the lid of the metal container. When it finally gives, everything tumbles to the ground. I shuffle through the stuff looking for some gauze to staunch the flow of blood. When I finally find it, I press it down firmly on the wound. Christ, woman, that hurts like hell. I just knew the portage would be the death of you. No wonder they call it double devil staircase. It's twice as bad as its namesake. Not as bad as far as your administrations, he complains. This shouldn't have happened. If you had let me help you. But no, you have to be Mr. Tough Guy who has to do everything himself. I dab at the wound. The bleeding has slowed down some. I grab the alcohol and apply it directly to his knee. Tom hisses. Did I hurt you? You sure didn't make it any better. If I were you, I wouldn't be giving the one person around who could help you any salve. Good point. I wish we had some honey, but we left it back at the camp. Honey? Are you planning to eat me then? I grin. Now's the moment. No. But being a doctor's daughter, I have learned a few things. I place a new piece of gauze over the wound and begin to bandage it. Are you planning to tell me about it? I secure the bandage with a knot and place both hands on either side of his leg. Honey helps promote the healing and kills germs. I look around. Now what? Now we press on. Have you lost your mind? We can't stay here. No, I don't suppose we can. My gaze rests on the canoe near the bottom of the staircase. At least the canoe's headed in the right direction. I should be able to drag it back into the river, I say. You're not bloody dragging my new canoe, Tom hollers. a bit late to worry about damage, I say. The only way I can get you back to camp to tend to you properly is to drag it into the river. Tom sighs. What if we carry it together? I say doubtfully. Are you sure you can manage it with that bad knee? As long as you obey my commands without any back talk. That might be a little hard. So what is this telling you? These sound like an old married couple. They're bouncing off each other, saying what they want to say. And here it is, 1915, and she's confidently speaking up for herself. We get a sense that she doesn't put up with any nonsense from anyone. It also tells you that they're both adventurers. They're going out into Algonquin Park, they're camping for 3 weeks at a time. There are wolves out there, there are bears out there, snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're out there doing it. So it gives you an idea like character development through the dialogue as well and how they're speaking to each other. So that's what that little passage can give you. It tells you about.
Well, and it's also your description of the landscape was very clear because I could just imagine, I could just see it. So,
Excellent,
you know,
excellent.
you talk about how important that is for you in terms of the landscape taking on character. And that's exactly what happened in that passage.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad. You know, it's funny because when I wrote my first book, I had my girlfriend's daughter was editing at the time, and I asked her to read it.
Mhm.
And she was the one who encouraged me to spend more time describing things. And then I found when I started doing that, I actually liked it. I enjoyed doing it. I felt like I was really getting into the story, into the landscape, and you know where the setting was taking place. So I've made that a big part of all my books that I write. That's why it's so important to go there
Yeah.
and just feel it and experience what it is. Yeah, it's exciting.
So Gillian, do you ever have young writers contact you, or have you coached writers yourself?
A little bit. I know I did when I did a flow retreat a few years ago. Part of what I did was writing, journaling and stuff like that. And I met a writer there, and Christina Rustica, I think her name is. Anyway, she was writing, and she had talked about wanting to write a book, and she was nervous about it.
Mhm.
And I said, well, if you ever need help, let me know.
Mhm.
And I never thought I'd ever hear from her.
Mhm.
But a year later, I got a message from her.
Uh-huh.
But she was in a place now where she was ready to do something about it. She said,
Mhm.
would you read what I wrote?
Mhm.
And so I did.
Mhm.
And I gave her some pointers, and
Mhm.
mostly what she needed was, how to arrange it. And
Right.
then when we talked, and I think I gave her some encouragement too. She got so excited. She went home right away and started changing it all around. And this is in the evening. She was so excited about it. And she went on to write a book.
Fantastic.
Again, with Friesen Press, she was nervous about who do I get to publish this? And
Mhm.
my experience with Friesen Press had been really good. And so I
Mhm.
encouraged her to go there, and she did. She became one of their top writers. And
That's
now she's
amazing.
offering courses for people. Like she writes about what her life was like, um, growing up and the struggles that she went through. And, she was out on a very early stage and the things that she had learned.
Mhm.
And she was very well. So she created a course out of that. And she's been offering it to people and doing very well for herself. So, yeah. Um, And that wasn't fiction writing. I mean, because every genre is a little different, but I could at
Right.
least give her my thoughts. And it
Yes.
really helped. In fact, I mentioned in her book after she wrote it how I helped her, which is kind of
Oh,
nice.
oh, cool. Good.
So
Good.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Well, I know, like at Link, I've had a couple of ladies mention they want to write a book and
Mhm.
memoir,
Mhm.
something. Yeah, I can think everybody has a story in them, right?
That's right.
And yeah,
Absolutely.
so I'm starting to think about, maybe I could be doing something,
Mhm.
to get these ladies on their way.
Absolutely.
So yeah, who
Great.
knows?
Great. Well, Gillian, it's been a pleasure to have
Mm.
you on my program today. You've given us and me a lot to think about, and I've certainly learned a lot more about the process of writing and also the passion, because I see the passion in you.
Yes.
It's so much a part of who you are, being a writer.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
very
you.
cool. Um, and we will post your information on the page so people will be able to find you and they'll be able to read your blog. And you will keep us posted as to any events. Do you have any upcoming events? I think you have a retreat coming up.
Yes, yes, I do. The retreat is a women's weekend retreat, and it's going to be May the 6th and 7th, and it will be in Puth, which is not far away, for people in Windsor, Leamington, Chatham, Tilbury area. And it's going to be in 3 parts. It's going to be, I'm going to be doing the writing. So you get 3 workshops. The writing, you'll be answering the question, who am I? The vision board, you're going to be answering the question, what do I want? And the art, how am I going to express this?
Cool.
So that's pretty amazing. And so 3 workshops in 1 weekend. And the retreat is called Imagine.
Imagine.
So we'll be imagining a new life for ourselves through this retreat. So mark your calendars. Information is coming out very soon.
Okay, great. And I'll post that as well on the podcast when that's available. Very good. Well, thank you again, Gillian.
Oh, thank you. This was
Wonderful
wonderful.
to have you.
You made it so easy. Thank you, Crystal.
And thank you to all of my listeners. I hope you will join me next time as I continue to explore the journey to inner wisdom. And you can go to my website, journeytoinnerwisdom.ca, and sign up for my newsletter and see what else I have going on.
Exciting.